The morning light filtered weakly through the grimy, cracked windows of the Holleridge boarding school, casting long, distorted shadows across the peeling wallpaper and dusty floorboards. Elliot Graves stood near the entrance hall, the familiar weight of his worn leather jacket hanging loosely from his shoulders as he exhaled deeply. The building was eerily quiet, yet the oppressive presence that had haunted every corner during the past weeks still clung to the air like a thick fog. He pulled out his battered journal from the inside pocket, the edges frayed from frequent use, and settled onto a splintered bench beneath a faded painting of a stern-faced headmaster. His pen hovered momentarily before scratching across the page, the soft sound a fragile rhythm in the silence. Day 37, he wrote. The building feels alive again today, though the voices are quieter in the daylight. Still, the memories cling. The hidden rooms, the children's belongings, they weigh on us all. As Elliot wrote, his thoughts drifted back to the events that had unfolded here. The discovery of the hidden rooms filled with forgotten toys and personal artifacts, the whispered voices that had threaded through the walls, and the haunting shadows that had twisted into shapes, both familiar and terrifying. His fingers tightened around the pen. He was no longer just a project manager. He was a reluctant chronicler of a history soaked in sorrow. Footsteps echoed softly behind him, and Elliot looked up to see Maya Chen approaching, her glasses reflecting the weak sunlight as she carried a small wooden crate. I found more items in the eastern wing, she said quietly, kneeling beside a battered trunk that had been uncovered the previous day. Drawings, old photographs, some taken by the children themselves, I think. Maya's voice was steady but laced with a palpable sadness. She carefully lifted a fragile drawing from the crate. The paper yellowed and edges curled. The image depicted a small child holding a balloon, the smile twisted with an unsettling hint of fear. These artifacts, they tell stories the walls can't speak aloud, she murmured. They remind us that these children were real and their suffering was terrible. Elliot nodded, the weight of her words settling heavily on his chest. We need to catalog everything, he said firmly. The more we understand, the better prepared we are, though I can't shake the feeling that understanding might not be enough. Around them, the rest of the crew moved through the building with a quiet urgency. Jared Morales rubbed his eyes, the dark circles beneath them deepening with each sleepless night. His muscular frame sagged slightly as he leaned against a wall, the tattoos on his arms looking faded and worn in the dim light. I don't know how much more of this I can take, he confessed to Tommy Briggs, who stood nervously nearby, eyes darting toward the flickering shadows cast by the broken ceiling tiles. Tommy's voice wavered as he replied, Maybe the building just wants us to remember, like the voices say. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. Claire Dunham observed the scene from the doorway, crossing her arms tightly. Her usual composure was tinged with a rare vulnerability. I still don't believe in ghosts, she said softly, though her gaze lingered on the distant hallway where a shadow seemed to stretch and pulse unnaturally. But this place, it's changing us all. Elliot closed his journal and stood, the faint creak of the old floorboards beneath his boots sounding like a warning. We have to face this, he said resolutely. Not just for the project, but for the children who never got their chance. The building seemed to pulse with an unseen energy, the air thick with unsaid words and withheld memories. As the sun climbed higher, the fragile light fought against the encroaching darkness within the walls, but the unease remained. The crew's shared sleeplessness and mounting nightmares were proof that the past was far from buried. In the quiet moments between day and night, the whispered voices returned, threading through dreams and waking hours alike. Elliot's journal became a lifeline, a way to tether himself to reality even as the haunting threatened to unravel his mind. Each entry was a fragment of memory, a piece of the puzzle that might one day bring peace or doom them all. As he prepared to leave the building that afternoon, Elliot glanced back at the faded mural in the hallway. The children's faces seemed to watch him, their eyes reflecting not anger, but a deep, aching sorrow. He whispered a silent vow to remember, to protect, and to confront whatever waited within the walls before it was too late. Outside, the crew gathered briefly, sharing quiet conversations laced with exhaustion and fear. The building loomed behind them, a silent sentinel holding its secrets close. The battle was only beginning, and the fragments of memory were scattered like shards of glass, sharp, painful, and impossible to ignore. The sun dipped low, casting the school into shadow once more, and the faintest whisper echoed through the empty halls, "Remember us." Elliot paused, gripping his journal tightly. The heavy air in the break room seemed to thicken by the minute, as if the building itself was pressing down on the gathered men and women. Elliot Graves sat at the center of the room, his hands wrapped tightly around a chipped ceramic mug, the bitter dregs of cold coffee long since ignored. Around him, the crew's usual banter had dissolved into a simmering silence, fractured only by the occasional sharp intake of breath or the shifting of boots on cracked linoleum. Jared Morales stood near the doorway, his broad shoulders hunched and fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles gleamed white. The tattoos snaking down his arms looked almost like veins of shadow in the dim light, a physical map of the battles he carried within. He was a man at the edge, torn between the demands of the job and the ghosts that haunted his nights. Claire Dunham leaned against the wall, arms crossed tightly, her eyes darting between Jared and Elliot. The architect's usual composed demeanor was fraying. The tension was palpable. Even Tommy Briggs, the youngest and most impressionable, hovered near the corner, his gaze flickering nervously as though expecting the walls themselves to speak. "We can't keep doing this," Claire finally said, her voice cutting through the charged atmosphere. "Every day, something else goes wrong. Equipment breaks, people get hurt. This place, it's too much." Jared's jaw twitched. "You think it's just the place?" he spat, stepping forward, his voice low and venomous. "Maybe it's the goddamn ghosts, or whatever the hell's got this place crawling. But maybe it's us. Maybe we're all breaking because we're not made for this." Elliot raised a hand, trying to stem the rising tide. "We're here to finish the job. We've faced worse before. We can push through this. Push through." Jared's voice cracked, the carefully built facade crumbling. "You don't get it, do you? This place, it's tearing me apart. Every night, I see things, hear things, and you want me to just keep pretending." The room grew colder, the shadows deepening as if the walls absorbed the raw emotion. Elliot felt a familiar chill crawl up his spine, not just from the building's drafty shell, but from the weight of Jared's pain. It mirrored his own, a reflection of scars long buried. "Jared," Elliot said softly, stepping closer, "we're all fighting something, but we have to hold it together. For the crew, for the project, hold it together." Jared's laugh was bitter, hollow. "Look around, Elliot. Who's really holding anything together? We're falling apart, and I'm not sure anyone can save us." Claire's eyes flashed with a mix of frustration and fear. "This isn't just about stress. Something here is feeding off us. It's alive." Tommy shifted uneasily, clutching the strap of his tool bag. "I keep hearing them," he whispered, voice trembling. "The kids, they don't want us here." Elliot forced himself to breathe deeply. The last thing he wanted was to lose control in front of them, but the cracks were widening. His own childhood memories, the loss, the guilt pressed against his mind's eye, threatening to overwhelm him. "We'll get through this," he said, voice firmer now. "Together. But we have to be honest with ourselves and each other." As if answering the unspoken tension, the fluorescent light above flickered violently, plunging the room into momentary darkness before sputtering back to life. A low whisper curled through the stale air, indistinct but unmistakable. Jared's head snapped up, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" Elliot nodded, swallowing the lump forming in his throat. "Yes, and it's not the last." Outside, the wind began to howl, rattling broken window panes and sending a cold draft through the cracked walls. The building seemed to shudder, alive and watchful, as if feeding off the crew's fraying nerves. Later, in the crumbling hallway, Elliot found himself between Jared and Claire, striving to mediate the growing discord. Voices were lowered but tense, every word weighted with exhaustion and fear. "We can't let this place break us," Elliot said, voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "We need each other more than ever." Claire shook her head slowly. "I'm not sure we can keep going like this. Something's wrong here." Jared's gaze was dark, haunted. "It's not just here," he muttered. "It's in us." The stale air carried a faint whisper, barely audible but chilling nonetheless. It was as if the building itself was listening, reacting to their discord with silent menace. Tommy, standing a few steps away, traced the peeling wallpaper with trembling fingers. The faded floral pattern seemed to writhe beneath his touch, blending with the faint echoes of children's laughter and whispered secrets. His breath hitched, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "They're watching," he whispered. "They don't want us here." Elliot's heart pounded as he realized the depth of the challenge before them, not just the physical dangers, but the psychological warfare that threatened to consume them all. Outside, rain began to patter against the broken windows, a relentless rhythm that matched the pounding in his chest. Shadows deepened, stretching and twisting as if alive. The building breathed around them, a malevolent presence growing stronger with every fractured moment. Elliot clenched his fists, forcing himself to focus. They had to hold together, for their own sakes and for the children whose memories haunted these walls. Because if they fractured now, there might be no coming back. The night stretched ahead, dark and unyielding, whispering promises of terror yet to come. And somewhere, deep within the walls, the teeth gleamed in the shadows, waiting. The chill in the air felt sharper than usual as Maya Chen knelt before the ancient filing cabinet wedged into the farthest corner of the school's forgotten basement. The cabinet, a relic coated in rust and peeling paint, had been concealed behind a collapsed wall during the initial demolition. Dust motes danced in the weak beam of her flashlight, settling on the cracked linoleum beneath her knees. With a trembling hand, she grasped the handle and pulled the drawer open. A musty scent of decay and old paper filled her nostrils, and the hollow creak of metal echoed through the silence. Inside lay the brittle remnants of the school's past, yellowed folders, brittle pages, and faded photographs. Maya's breath hitched as she gingerly lifted a folder marked "Student Records, Confidential." The edges crumbled under her cautious fingers, revealing handwritten notes, medical reports, and haunting letters from forgotten children. The ink had faded, but the pain etched into the words was unmistakable. Names blurred by tears, dates of absences, and somber notations spoke of neglect, abuse, and unexplained illnesses. A sudden coldness spread through the room, as if the weight of these stories pressed down on her chest. She called Elliot Graves, the project manager, over with a terse whisper. He arrived quickly, his worn leather jacket catching the faint light as he crouched beside her. Together, they began to spread the records across a battered wooden table in the crew's makeshift office, their faces illuminated by a single swinging bulb. The room felt too small to hold the sorrow these documents contained. "Look at this," Maya said softly, pointing to a letter penned by a former student named Lillian, dated 1962. The letter described the brutal treatment she endured at the hands of a staff member, pleading for help that never came. Nearby, a coroner's report detailed the mysterious death of a boy named Thomas, whose body was found in a hidden attic space 6 years later. Elliot's jaw tightened. "This isn't just haunting," he murmured. "It's a ledger of pain." The room fell into a heavy silence, interrupted only by the scratch of Maya's pen as she took notes. Each document revealed another layer of the school's tragic history. Children abandoned, medical neglect hidden beneath layers of bureaucracy, and cruel punishments inflicted in secrecy. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that the presence in the walls was not a mindless specter, but a guardian of these lost souls, demanding to be remembered. Outside the office, Jared Morales stood leaning against a cracked wall, arms crossed. His muscles tensed visibly as memories flickered behind his eyes, visions of his own battles with trauma and loss. For the first time, the skeptic found his world tilting. The evidence Maya brought forth challenged every doubt he held. His breath came quicker, his usual pragmatic facade beginning to fracture under the weight of undeniable truth. Claire Dunham lingered at the doorway, arms folded, her usual skepticism writ plainly across her face. Yet as Maya recounted the stories, the oppressive atmosphere of the building seemed to press against her resolve, softening her disbelief. The cold, clinical rationality she clung to gave way to a reluctant empathy, a recognition that some wounds were too deep for logic alone. "We have to tell them," Maya said quietly, meeting Elliot's eyes. "These children deserve to be known, to have their stories heard." Elliot nodded slowly. "And if we don't, this place will never let us leave." The crew gathered later that evening in the main hall, the air thick with tension and a newfound somberness. Maya shared her discoveries, reading aloud fragments of letters and reports, each word hanging heavy in the stale air. The workers listened, their faces pale and hushed, as the truth of the school's dark past seeped into their bones. For many, the revelation was a turning point. Fear shifted into something more complex, a mix of sorrow, guilt, and a fierce determination to honor the memories trapped within the walls. The entity was no longer a faceless enemy, but a sorrowful force, a collective guardian of pain and innocence lost. Yet beneath this resolve, darker currents churned. Jared's guarded eyes flickered with unrest, and Elliot felt the familiar tremors of his own buried trauma stirring anew. The building seemed to breathe around them, alive with whispered voices and shifting shadows, as if waiting to see how they would respond to the truth. That night, Elliot returned to his journal, the pen moving across the pages with a steady hand despite the turmoil roiling inside him. He wrote of revelations and resolve, of the fragile threads connecting past and present, and of the haunting reality that memory could never be silenced. Outside, the wind moaned through broken window panes, carrying faint echoes of children's laughter and their cries. Somewhere deep within the walls, the presence watched and waited, its sorrowful hunger momentarily sated by remembrance, but far from at rest. The line between guardian and ghost blurred, and the crew stood at the threshold of a deeper darkness, one that demanded more than courage, it demanded truth. As the first light of dawn crept through shattered glass, Elliot closed his journal. His eyes met Maya's across the room, each aware that the journey ahead would test not only their strength, but the very limits of their souls. The past was no longer buried. It was alive, and it had a voice. The air in the abandoned boarding school thickened with a suffocating weight, as if the very walls themselves had begun to breathe in the haunted memories they held. Elliot Graves sat hunched against the crumbling plaster of what was once the main hall. A battered leather-bound journal balanced awkwardly on his knees. His pen scratched unevenly across the page, the words seeming to form and unravel in the same breath. Around him, the whispered voices swelled names, fragments of laughter and half-forgotten stories weaving through the stale air like spectral threads. His breath hitched as a faint voice called out, "Elliot! Elliot!" The sound was barely audible, a mere wisp of a child's breath, yet it stirred something deep within his chest. He blinked rapidly, trying to focus, but the room seemed to shift and blur. The shadows lengthened, twisting into grotesque shapes that danced just beyond the edge of sight. His fingers trembled, the pen slipping from his grasp onto the cracked wooden floor. "You okay, boss?" came a tentative voice from the doorway. Elliot turned to see Tommy Briggs standing there, his youthful face pale and drawn, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. The young apprentice's sensitivity to the building's unsettling atmosphere had become increasingly apparent over the past days. It's nothing," Elliot murmured, hastily retrieving his pen. Just the voices again, louder this time. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Tommy stepped inside, the cold air trailing after him. "They're calling names tonight," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I heard Sarah and Michael." Elliot felt a chill ripple down his spine. Sarah and Michael names etched in Maya's research as children who had vanished without explanation decades ago. The whispered voices had been growing more insistent, weaving the past and present into a seamless nightmare. Maya Chen appeared then, entering the hall with a stack of brittle papers and faded photographs. Her glasses glinted in the dim light as she spread the artifacts carefully across a makeshift table. "I found more records," she said softly. "Diaries, letters, accounts of what happened here." The crew gathered around, drawn by the gravity of her discovery. Maya's voice carried a steady, somber weight as she read aloud passages that spoke of neglect, fear, and heartbreaking loss. Each word seemed to seep into the walls, feeding the restless presence lurking within. Jared Morales lingered at the edge of the group, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His muscular frame tensed visibly as a sudden chill swept through the basement corridor behind him. A guttural whisper echoed his name, low and threatening. He shook his head, struggling to maintain his skepticism in the face of mounting evidence. "This is just the house settling," he muttered under his breath, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his doubt. As the night deepened, the voices grew louder, overlapping in a cacophony that blurred the line between reality and hallucination. Elliot's journal entries became fragmented, scribbled in fits and starts as his mind teetered on the edge. He saw glimpses of translucent children flickering in the corners of his vision, heard laughter that twisted into cries, and felt the crushing weight of decades of sorrow pressing down on him. Tommy, meanwhile, seemed to slip further into the realm of the unseen. He spoke of conversations with the children, repeating names and stories that no one else could hear. His innocence and fear made him both a beacon and a bridge, connecting the living to the lost souls trapped within the walls. Maya worked tirelessly, piecing together the puzzle of the school's dark history. Her discoveries gave shape to the haunting, revealing it not as a mindless evil but a sorrowful force demanding recognition and remembrance. Her presence grounded the team even as the building's malevolent energy ebbed and flowed around them. Elliot's struggle to distinguish his own fears from the supernatural assaults grew more desperate. The whispered voices clawed at his mind, dredging up memories of his lost sibling, the guilt that had shadowed his entire life. His journal became both a refuge and a battleground, a place to confront the darkness within and without. The chapter ended with Elliot staring into the depths of a hidden corridor, the whispers swirling like a storm. "Who are you?" he called into the darkness, his voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. The silence answered for a heartbeat before a chorus of whispered names rose in chilling response, binding past and present in a haunting symphony. The voices from the past were no longer whispers, they were a reckoning,